Okay, thank you so much, and welcome to Crucial Consent, the OnePeopleTO conversation series. My name is Sheena, the owner, operator, founder of OnePeopleTO, and I really wanted to have these conversations in Black History Month, particularly because it's a conversation that really affects everybody, consent. And I know that, and think across the board, people of color communities tend to shy away from conversations around consent. I know, particularly as a self-identified Black person, that has been my experience, and for other people from other communities as well. I know this tends to kind of run a similar thread and a similar narrative. So I really thought it would be important for us to really have these conversations for a number of reasons, and in ways that we don't really talk about consent. So parental consent, obviously we're starting with that today. And I'm excited to have Chloe here to share your knowledge and experience and your expertise. But first, we will start with a land acknowledgement and a Black body acknowledgement, and just a 3-minute meditation, just to ground ourselves, because the energy is very wild and hectic and active. So just to get ourselves prepared to be in conversation and discourse. So first, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are on. I myself, being in Toronto, really want to take a moment to honor the Indigenous land, the ways of knowing and being of indigeneity, and how important it is for everybody, no matter where they are. So even if they're not on Turtle Island, really recognizing and honoring the people that have sustained and provided and cultivated and nurtured the lands that we are on for centuries. And I myself, as a settler, want to acknowledge all of the First Credit, the Mississaugas of the First Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Inuit, Métis, several First Nations communities that really continue to take care of the land and teach us all how to stay interconnected and grounded to really not just Mother Earth, but to each other as well. So thank you for taking a moment with me for that. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the Black bodies in this space. I will say it's not something that I've done before. I attended an event several weeks ago, and it was the first time that someone had ever acknowledged my presence as a Black body, and it felt so impactful for me. I thought it was something that I'd like to share going forward. And so really just from my heart, I just really want to acknowledge the journey of Black-skinned folks, dark-skinned folks all across the world, particularly those that had a transition through the Middle Passage, and even if that's not in their ancestral lineage, really the impact of being a Black body in a space that, or in a world that has not always been so kind and loving. And so also, of course, with that, just recognizing that sometimes with that can come conversations or internal emotions based on someone's experience. And so just honoring wherever they may be at that time and taking responsibility for each of our energy in this space. Just taking a moment for that. Thank you. So I'll just take just like 2 minutes and ask you, if you feel to, close your eyes. If you don't, that's okay. Just watching me or casting your gaze down. Inviting you to take a long, deep breath, holding for a moment, and letting it go. Again, long, deep breath. Holding for 1, 2, 3, and release. Last time collectively, long, deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in this time and space, just honoring each person, each individual present here or whoever happens to watch after. Acknowledging your value, your importance and presence in this world. Thank you for not only being here in this virtual room and being connected to us, but also being connected and taking responsibility for all of the people that you are connected to. And maybe for a few moments, just taking a moment to send some love to yourself. Sending a little love to your heart. And to maybe anyone that's on your mind right now or over the past day. Just feeling your body in this space, on your chair or couch, in the room that you are in the building that you are in, on the street, in the town or city. Connecting your feet to the ground below you and your crown, top of your head to the sky above you, and just feeling that flow. And just taking a moment for gratitude for yourself. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So when you feel ready, I'd invite you to open your eyes. Thank you. So I am just going to start with an introduction of Chloe. Thank you so much again for being here. And so as we have more people join, I will bring them in. But in the meantime, so Chloe is a guided spirit and a holistic health and consent educator, doing her work as the Reiki queer, believing fiercely in the faith and strength within queer, BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities. She stands to hold space for and witness the magic and radical self-healing power of herself and others. Chloe, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to welcome you and to share your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me again, Sheena. I'm so appreciative for the space and for One People. And I think that this work is so necessary. So I'm in appreciation for this being your brainchild and for really thinking to have these really crucial conversations, especially around consent. Shall we get started? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you so much for everyone that is viewing from home and for those that are viewing after the fact. I appreciate your time and your presence being here. So what we'll be discussing today and what we'll be exploring today is parent-to-child consent and how we can use this knowledge of consent and what it looks like to consent our children to help build better bonds with them. So Sheena just led us through a really grounding land and body acknowledgement. Thank you again for that. And so our time together today is going to look like an intro, so laying the foundations, just talking about what consent is, what parent consent is. We'll talk about boundaries, what boundary setting for youth can look like. We'll also talk about autonomy for children, babies, and youth. We'll define it and talk about what that can look like in real life. Once we take our break, we will come back and have a discussion around what it looks like and the difference between being disrespectful and setting a boundary, and how to identify that within your child and how to navigate that if that comes up. And finally, we'll have an activity where I will show everyone a couple of scenarios and we can talk together about what that looks like based on the things that we've learned and the things that we've discussed. So at any time, if you would like me to adjust my pacing or if you have any questions, please feel free to be active in the chat and we can slow down or accommodate you. Same thing if you have any accessibility needs or any needs regarding sound or movement. So getting right into it, Consent 101, an intro to parent consent. So starting off with a basic definition of what consent is. So consent is essentially an ongoing process where we are able to deny or allow access to our physical, emotional, or energetic bodies. It's the right to have your choices listened to and respected. It's mandatory for everyone, and it can always be changed or revoked at any time, meaning it's not static, it's not something that you decide and then it stays unchanged for the rest of your life. Your consent is something that can grow with you and shape and take its own shape as you grow and as you make new discoveries about yourself and the things that you like. So consent is not assuming that our practices are the norm. So growing up, I heard all the time that we need to be treating people how they want to be, how we want to be treated. You know, you should treat people how you want to be treated is the common phrase. But what that does unknowingly and unintentionally is it centers ourselves and it makes our own norm the norm for everyone else. But that's simply not true because the way that we want to be treated is not always the way that other people want to be treated. For the simple fact that we're not all the same and we all have different needs and different things that we need to see and hear to feel respected. And so we should instead be shifting our focus to treating people how they want to be treated and not making an assumption that our practices are the same practices of those around us. And a simple way to do this is just by asking and opening up conversations about how they want to be treated, about what their boundaries are. Consent is not only mandatory for strangers, so this especially applies to close friends, colleagues, and families. It's not only one conversation. As we talked about before, it's not static, which means that it changes and it grows with you as you grow. And consent does not look like getting annoyed or passive aggressive or negatively projecting onto others for setting their boundaries. This is especially important because sometimes when others set a boundary, it might make us uncomfortable or even upset. However, it's very important that we're able to sit with whatever emotions come up in our own bodies and that we are not projecting the thought that it is not okay for our friends or our families to set boundaries. Excuse me. And one way that we can do this is through our body language and through maintaining clear and friendly body language if someone has set a boundary or told us no, which, you know, is a practice in itself, but is very necessary. So parental consent is the process of listening to and respecting your child's boundaries. It is letting your child know that it's okay to say no, even to you sometimes. It is identifying and recognizing your feelings as separate from your child's feelings, meaning you can understand and recognize that your feelings are yours and their feelings are theirs. This is a very important and very crucial thing to keep in mind because a lot of the times, unknowingly, people might fall into the trap of enmeshment. And the process of enmeshment is where there is no clear deciphering between what you're feeling and what your family is feeling. The issue with this is that there is no clear identifying of individual needs, and therefore it can be a little bit challenging for people to feel safe to express what they need if what they need looks different from what everyone else feels. if that makes sense. So essentially, again, it's that process of being able to sit with your feelings as they come up and hold space with your child's as they come up, but not necessarily conflating the two all the time. Parental consent also looks like leaving space for your child to express themselves, even when it hurts your feelings or even when it makes you uncomfortable. So why does parental consent matter? For a bunch of reasons. So it shows your child that you care about their feelings and that you care about what they feel comfortable and uncomfortable with. This helps keep your child safe by letting them know that it's okay to say no and it's okay for them to make their own choices about their own bodies. It also helps them feel safe enough to open up and talk to you about things that might be happening in their life or things that they may be struggling with later on. It reminds your child that they are allowed to protect themselves, their bodies, and their boundaries. Which leads us to understanding boundaries and setting a foundational knowledge of what boundaries are. So, boundaries are rules and practices that we need to feel respected and safe. So, this can look like things that we like and want more of, but it can also look like things that we don't want in our lives at all. Boundaries are important because they're things that we extend, not necessarily things that we put up. So they're not only ways to let people know what we don't want, but they're also ways to connect with people. And so it tells others in our circle how we need to be treated. Cross boundaries or disrespected boundaries usually leads to trust issues or feelings of being unsafe with that person. And boundaries are important because we show people how we care about them by listening to and respecting what their needs are, even if they don't necessarily make sense to us. Is this an okay pacing for everyone so far? I know we're covering a lot of information at once, but okay, awesome. And if anyone has any questions or wants anything clarified as we're going along, again, feel free. So, boundary setting for youth can look like a lot of things. So, it can look like needing to cry or get upset or express emotion without fear of being punished. From my own personal background, I was raised within the Jamaican diaspora as a second generation Jamaican. And so there were a lot of practices that were very harmful for me as a child growing up. And one of them was a very, very strict lack of expression. I was not allowed to express the fullness of what I was feeling. There are very few things that would not be classified as disrespect. And so, in that, there is a lot of emotional stifling and a lot of opportunities for self soothing that I did not have the chance to tap into at that age. And so, it's extremely important for those that are able to have that space available for their child to cry or get upset or express without fear of being punished, so that they're not getting into that habit of self-editing or making themselves smaller or not being true to how they're actually feeling in the moment. It can look like boundary setting for youth can look like needing to spend more time with friends, or it can look like them needing more patience or reassurance. Um, Youth needing more patience or reassurance doesn't always look like them clearly stating this. So this is also something that parents might have to be able to tap into or open the conversation with on their own if they're having a particularly challenging time. It can also, boundary setting for youth can also look like them asking to stay home a lot, asking to stay home alone, or having interest in being by themselves a lot more than usual. It can look like them needing more privacy and trust, or look like the space for them to try or do new things. So again, these are all scenarios where out of context can be a little bit challenging to navigate. However, if we're able to treat everything as an opportunity for conversation, then a lot of the times, if your child is asking to stay home alone a lot more or asking for time away, it can usually mean that there's just a need that they're trying to fulfill. You know, maybe they're feeling overstimulated, or maybe there's just emotions that they're not able to put into words yet. And so needing that time for self-reflection is still very important at every age. boundary setting for youth can also look like them stating things. So stating, no, I don't like this, you're not listening, or changed my mind. All of these are an example of, again, youth setting their boundaries in a way that is verbal this time. So letting their parents know that they don't want to do something. A lot of defiance might at first feel confusing or may at first not feel helpful. However, again, if we're able to treat everything as a conversation and really open those channels for discussion and for expression, then we might find that our youth are saying these things for reasons that might not be clear upon first glance. Um, Also, allowing your children the space to change their mind without, again, fear of being punished or repercussions lets them know that it is okay for them to take autonomy in that way, and it's okay for them to be unapologetic in that way and change their minds. And it really helps them get familiar with the process of evolution, which, as we know, is a lot of learning and unlearning and shedding. And again, it's a very realistic stance that I think if we're able to treat with a lot of care and empathy, we can help prepare children for a lot of the changes to come in life. So autonomy for baby, children, and youth. So a quick definition, body autonomy is essentially the right for a person to govern or decide what happens to their bodies without any external influence or coercion. So autonomy starts in infancy. So for any of us on the call who have raised children or raised babies or had babies, babies are extremely comfortable with letting you know when they are uncomfortable. If a baby is uncomfortable, nothing is going to fly, nothing's going to happen. So they, at that age, are very comfortable in using their voice. And as parents, we're able to be trained in that language of understanding and picking up on the comfort and discomfort of your baby, and then making parental decisions based on its effects on your infant's comfort and its effects on their well-being. And so it's also a practice to continue this beyond infancy. So family, friends, strangers might assume access to your child's body. This can look like giving them hugs or kisses without asking them first, or asking you instead of asking them. It can look like coercing them to speak, or some things like bribing for gifts, for a smile, just ways that we might see or may at some point been normalized for adults to interact and change a child's mind after they were initially told no. So remembering that each interaction is a lesson for both the parent and the child is crucial, because after each interaction, your child takes away what is acceptable and what is not acceptable based on the reactions of those around them. And also remembering that a part of protecting your child is the level of respect and the level of credibility that you assign to their voice. Again, from my own personal experience growing up, it was a lot of children should be seen and not heard. There was a lot of hierarchy in terms of respect assigned, whereas children were at the very bottom. So my voice as a child did not really matter. And that was stated several times that I should be quiet, or I should not insert myself, or I should not assert myself at all. And so that is very crucial, and that can be very damaging, because at that age we're learning that our voice is not something that has credibility or that needs to be respected or that needs to be listened to. And so allowing this mindfulness to inform how we treat our child helps inform the inner voice that our child will grow up with, and the internal dialogue that they will have, and the things that they will tell themselves. It really sets the basis for their self-esteem. And so we are at the, oh, awesome. We are directly at 7:30. Love that. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. So I invite you to get some water, move around, look somewhere other than a screen. And we'll be back at 7:40. Is that cool, Sheena?
That is awesome, Chloe. I need to get some water, so thank you.
No problem.
I used to wonder if life was meant for me. After all of the pain and abuse I suffered mentally, I used to look up in the skies in disbelief. The philosophies of God and divinity. Like what happened to love, what happened to mercy and sympathy. There isn't such thing as heaven, you gotta be kidding me. This life on earth is killing me literally. Contemplating suicide, I was ready to die. Until I searched within and found heaven inside. Until I loved myself and found heaven inside. I came to find and realize that there is a God in every soul and every mind. We are that, we are divine. Never lose sight of the light in you. Never lose touch with the love in you. I write these words to let you know that I'm proud of you. Thank you for never giving up on the God in you. There's a God in you. Never give up on the God in you. I'm from a time and place where there's no time or space, far beyond the heavens, way beyond the realms of outer space, where birds cannot fly and planes cannot go, the blissful land of Dharma Setra, the infinite abode of the soul. I'm from a galaxy far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth. I'm from a galaxy far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Stay free. Transcending this world of limited sight. Reunite in my masculine and feminine sides. As I follow my breath, my energies rise until I reach that sight of infinite light. Chushta Chaitanya, consider it Christ. My home is bliss and infinite light. I'm from a galaxy far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth.
Oh, yes.
I'm from a galaxy.
Absolutely. Let me find it.
Far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi,
I'm going to
Samadhi.
put it in the chat.
Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Stay free. Through my life and times, I write these rhymes. But very soon I might decline and choose to reunite with the light inside. It's alright to cry, but wipe your eyes. My life's eternal. My life's divine. I just came to remind you of the light inside. I'll be back. I'm from a galaxy far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth. I'm from a galaxy far, far away, but I'm going home. Wish I could stay. See you later, Earth. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi. Samadhi, Samadhi. Satnam, Samadhi, stay free. I send you love. I send you vibrations of peace. I send you vibrations of healing. I send you vibrations of clarity and heavenly vibrations of divine assistance. I wish you a life filled with joy. May you be filled with persistence and purpose. May you be guided in service. May your life be transformed. May your life be healed. May you forgive and celebrate life. May you live and celebrate love. All that exists is love. Be love and see love in every heart and every soul. Remember to play. It's just a play. Remember God. All is God. You are that. You are free. Stay free. It matters not if you see things as I do. All that matters is that you try to be guided by that universal light inside you. Learning to embrace all things is vital. Acting with love and kindness to both friends, foes, and rivals. Need I remind you, life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I'm crying, I feel like I'm down. I'm doing my best. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I feel like I'm down. I'm doing my best. Have you ever prayed for the sunshine on a rainy day? Looking in the clouds for an angel's face, wishing and hoping they can take the pain away. At times we pray and it seems as though God never has a thing to say. Through silent nights and aimless days, so that your trials and troubles never came to stay. You have to learn to free your mind in order for the change to break. Know that life is a journey and sometimes we just need a change of pace, so that we may one day change our ways. Through changeless days and sleepless nights, you have to endure with peace and light. Embrace love and be polite, and be free for life. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I'm crying, I feel like I'm down. I'm doing my best. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. Life is a beautiful mess. A beautiful mess. I'm trying, I feel like I'm down. I'm doing my best. And sometimes it may be hard to look at life on the bright side, especially when your darkest hours arise at midday instead of nighttime. And all of your hope seems to melt away like candles when the light dies. But rest assured, everything will be quite fine. It is darkness alone that influences us to let our light shine. You and I live for the same reasons that Christ died, to sing the glories of heaven in each and every lifetime. In tight times, you may pray for days and nights, but as long as you place your faith in God and not thy faith in sight, even your darkest days will be.
Welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sheena.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We are just coming back from our break. I hope everyone had a necessary reprieve from screen time for a moment. For those that are just joining, I'm going to just do a quick little review of what we've been talking about up until now. So we've just been discussing a bit of Consent 101, which looks like what consent is, so an ongoing process, the right to have choices listened to and respected, something that can always be changed. We spoke about what consent is not. So consent is not only mandatory for strangers, it involves decentering ourselves and choosing to treat people how they want to be treated rather than how we want to be treated. it looks like it looks like understanding that it's not only one conversation. We talked about parental consent, which is essentially the process of listening to, respecting your child's boundaries, letting them know that it is okay to say no and honoring their voice, leaving space for them to leaving space for them to express themselves, even if it makes us uncomfortable or hurts our feelings, and identifying that our feelings are our own and our child's feelings are theirs, which is avoiding the process of enmeshment, which can be unhealthy at an emotional level. We talked about parental consent and why it matters. So, showing your child that we care about their feelings and what they're comfortable and uncomfortable with, helping your child stay safe by letting them know that it is okay to say no, and by allowing them to make choices regarding their own bodies, and also reminding them that it is okay to protect themselves. We talked about boundaries as rules or practices that we need to feel safe, as governing what we don't want, but also what we want and need more of, and showing how boundaries are an act of community care when we can listen to them. We talked about boundary setting for youth, which can look like them needing to express without fear of punishment, needing to spend more time alone or with their peers, and expressing themselves, again, even if it makes us uncomfortable or hurts their feelings. And lastly, before the break, we talked about autonomy in children, babies, and youth. So, talking about others assuming access to your child or infant's body by hugging or touching them without asking them first. Reminders that each interaction is a lesson for both parent and child, as it informs your child of what's unacceptable and what is acceptable, and that a part of protecting your child is a level of respect and credibility that you assign to their voice. So now that we're back from our break, we'll be having a discussion on what it looks like and the differences between disrespect and boundaries. So how to spot the differences and what to do to help. So I put together this gorgeous little flowchart, and you'll notice that a lot of these things might be in more than one category, simply because usually there's a lot of flow with things that come up emotionally, and it's usually not only coming from one source. So on the right side, we have, on the left side, we have boundaries, and then on the exact opposite side, we have disrespect, and in the middle, we have time to talk, which essentially is where it might be helpful to open up some conversation on either side. So under boundaries, we have things that we have talked about already. So for example, your child saying no or denying something, them making decisions about their own bodies, denying affection and touch, which can also look like a time to talk if this is a drastic change that you're noticing, or if this is just something that you want to talk to them about. Disagreeing, again, is a great time to open up a conversation so that you're able to hear them out and allow them, again, that opportunity to use their voice and listen to it, so that you're showing them that their voice is still credible, even if you don't necessarily agree with them. And changing moods, which, it's a part of life, it's a part of growing up. Emotions and moods are not static, they're ever evolving. And again, this may also be a time to open up a conversation. So on the other side, we have disrespect, which might be behaviors that are a bit more extreme. And so we have things like dishonesty, yelling and hurtful language, putting others in harm / destroying property, and violence. So we'll off the bat notice that there are key differences in boundary settings and in disrespect. So with boundary settings, we'll notice that a lot of these decisions are usually for the child in some way to protect themselves or to meet their own needs. So, for example, things like saying no, making their own decisions, denying things, changing their mind, disagreeing, are all things that they process and decide on their own, and usually for their own benefit. Whereas disrespecting is usually more reactionary and might come as a result of stronger feelings or situations that they might be reacting to. And of course, I've put almost all of these as eclipsing the time to talk bubble, because these are all wonderful opportunities to open up channels of care, but also conversation. And I also want to use this point to remind everybody that there is nothing inherently violent with discipline, and there are certainly ways to invite discipline and self-correction, and to invite conversations and opportunities for your child to take accountability for their actions without deliberately being violent or harmful. And this all starts with a conversation and letting them know that you are not their dictator or the overlord of their lives to hand out punishments or sentences when they don't comply, but rather someone that's here to help them navigate the things that are hard. And that can also look like setting boundaries on your side too for the things that are allowed and the things that are not allowed. In the middle, we have things like complete lack of interest or withdrawal, self-harm, and again, yelling and hurtful language, all of which are opportunities to check in with your child and meet them with empathy and kindness and a curiosity about their experience, rather than taking your own feelings and kind of coloring the scenario with that. Does that make sense for everyone?
Definitely. I'll just add in too. It's interesting that you talk about, the child-parent dynamic, but also, you never kind of stop being a parent and you kind of never stop being a child. So I feel like it lasts the whole lifetime, the whole lifespan, or different lifespans. So.
Absolutely. And yes, that's an amazing thing that you bring up, because a lot of adults think that just because they're grown up that they are done growing, which is just simply not the case. Because grown-ups are just kind of like part 2, 3, 4, 5 of your childhood and your adolescence, and it's just stacking on years and experience. But the foundations largely were set in those formative years. So, in the same way that we're usually all students, we are also all children still as well. And we also have a relationship with our inner child. Yes, thank you for that. Super important. I found a really awesome quote reminding everyone that the greatest indicator of a good parent is how good a parent you are to your own inner child. Of course, meaning that doing that work to go internally and to meet and sit down with the child that lives inside of you and to ask them how they feel, and to really extend that grace to the little parts of yourself so that you're able to also extend that same grace and understanding to your own child, is very important. This also is important because it offers some perspective on individuality. So, not falling into the trap of believing that our children are just mini me's, but understanding that they're fully formed spirits and souls, a lot of which have been here before and have their own journey to go through. And as parents, we're accepting that responsibility to help guide them. But a lot of that work starts internally with our own processes. So we have an activity prepared for folks. And I invite you to unmute yourself or to put your answers or your thoughts in the chat. So I'm going to provide everyone with 3 different scenarios. And based on the things that we've talked about or your own knowledge, I'd love to hear what you think about them. So scenario number 1 says, Miriam has a toddler currently going through their no phase. Whenever anyone tries to hug or kiss Miriam's child, they yell no or squirm away. Miriam has noticed that some family members and friends give her child a kiss or a hug anyways. So what do we notice about child boundaries in this scenario, and how can Miriam step in to support her toddler? So I'll leave the slide up for folks that want to read that on their own, and we'll maybe pause here for a couple of minutes for anyone that would like to contribute to our discussion.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi. Apologize in advance for any background noise. I thought this was an interesting scenario because I have a toddler who he's in that no phase, and granted, he's not around a lot of people right now just because of the pandemic. I was mostly around immediate family, but I have noticed scenarios where he'll assert himself and say like no, like so if a family member in possibly the most all-meaning way, will come over and maybe pat him on his bum. You know, babies tend to, I don't know, people seem to think they're like dolls or something, and they just like pick them up and do whatever. So like he, you know, come over and maybe pat him on his bum, or even just patting him on his belly or trying to touch his belly button under his shirt. And he'll say like, no, no, no. And I've, you know, stepped in to empower his decision and his no, and kind of acknowledging that, oh, you said no, like you don't want that, you don't like that. And I'll say to the person like, oh, you know, he said no, you know, let's like kind of like, I guess, raising his voice a little bit for him and making his voice more I guess coming from the parents, sort of supporting his voice, I guess.
Right.
But I'm open to suggestions around if that's the best way to be handling it, or if there's another way that I can advocate for him in those kinds of scenarios.
Thank you so much. Is it Amisha? Amisha? Am I saying that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Amisha, yes.
Amisha. Yes, thank you so much for that. So I think that the way that you're handling things are excellent. And one thing that I noticed is that you are saying to these family members, he said no. And so as opposed to a lot of people, when they want to interact with the child, if they ask at all, they usually ask the parent, can I touch him? Can I give him a hug? Can I pick him up? Can I give him a kiss, etc.? And so it's really important to hear you say, he said no, to remind these people that although he's in a little body, although he's a smaller human, he still has autonomy, and he certainly still has the right to make that decision when he doesn't want to be touched. And so I think that is an excellent way to help support your toddler and to help at this point assign credibility to his voice, because, you know, growing up, he's going to remember the times that you advocated for him in that way, and the times that you didn't insert yourself as having permission or granting permission to his body, but rather inviting others to listen to him denying permission or granting permission to his body. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent way to answer this question too, is that one thing Miriam can do to step in and support her toddler is remind people, you know, they said no. And I think that is super necessary for people who aren't around children a lot, or for those that don't understand, again, that children, like you said, aren't little toys or aren't little dolls for us to pick up and do what we want to just because we think they're cute. Excellent. Thank you for that.
I'll just note, I think Jen has her hand raised as well.
Oh, sorry, Jen, I didn't see that. Go ahead.
All good. Thanks so much. Yeah, that was really great about stepping in and raising the voice of the child. I've experienced what Miriam has experienced a lot with both my children, who are now 6 and 11, especially as when they were a little bit younger, but and you know, it's different now because it's a pandemic and we hardly see folks. But one thing that I've learned to do, because I didn't know how to handle that, and so one thing I would maybe suggest to Miriam is you know, mimicking, because I feel like sometimes you know, maybe our parents or aunties and uncles, you know, when this happened to me, the child was often labeled as what we would call maarte, and that means like the child's snobby if they're not friendly or overtly friendly and like lovable and all of this. And so, you know, that's very harmful too, to be framed that way and just kind of labeled. And so what I would do is I would kind of mimic the behavior that I'd want, you know, maybe a parent or an auntie or uncle to learn. So then I would go down to the level of my children and be like, oh, you know, so-and-so wants a hug or a kiss. Like, is that okay? You know, that this person has a relationship with me in this way, and you know, they're really friendly. I think that they're really friendly, and is it okay? And then if they say yes, then, you know, we'll let that happen and build that relationship. And if they say no, I'll say, oh, he said no, you know, and that's like, we'll give him time, we'll give him space. And so just also gently teaching maybe our elders too, didn't have that opportunity to learn that through like mimicking those actions. So thank you for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen. That was super, super, super great. I think you brought up a really amazing point, which is that labeling starts instantly and expectations start instantly, to the point where there is almost a performance required of children to be very cute and to be very receptive of affection. And then if not, then, then they're thought of as being spoiled, or they're thought of as, not being a nice boy or a nice girl. A lot of very, very harmful tropes start very early. So I really enjoyed what you said about gently teaching our elders who might not have had access to this type of care, this type of nuance of parental or community care, about how we can reframe our language.
I just want to jump in and say thank you for that phrase of enforcing, like giving them space, like just give them space. I'm going to use that. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you, Jen. So scenario number 2 says, Annie and her 13-year-old daughter, Lynn, usually have movie nights with the family every Friday. Suddenly, Lynn is no longer interested in movie nights and has started spending every night in her room. Last night, when Annie tried to talk to Lynn about it, Lynn gets upset and slams the door to her bedroom. What is some advice we can give to Annie to help show empathy to herself and to also show some empathy to her daughter, Lynn?
I'll jump in here. Just quickly, just to say, I was definitely that 13-year-old daughter, Lynn, for an extended period of time. And so, I think in retrospect, I do have a lot of sympathy or empathy towards what my mom was going through. And so I would really just kind of encourage any Annie that's in this situation. One, yes, to give space, but also to it's a time and it's a space in time that passes, and one for themselves, for Annie, but also for the daughter. And so by letting Lynn know that at any time that she's ready to have a conversation, that Annie's there, but she won't encroach on her space if at all, and we'll wait, and we'll also check in, and really just having a lot of compassion for having to navigate someone else's emotional upheaval. It takes a lot.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think that this is also a great opportunity to start to marry or practice that balance of firmness and gentleness. And this is a scenario where a parent can also insert their boundaries in a way that is not harmful. So, for example, maybe at a different time, Annie can say, I'm here to hold space for you and it's okay for you to express. Or, maybe she can say something along the lines of, it's okay for you to express when you're upset, but it's not okay for you to yell, or it's okay for you to express when you're upset, but it's not okay for slamming doors all the time. And so it's an opportunity for both to express. And, again, it's such a time, 13, there's a lot going on. And so Lynn might not even have the space or the capacity to understand that at the time, but providing the understanding that Lynn won't always be 13, there's a lot of room here for retrospect and a lot of room for reflection. And it's something where foundationally it can help her to, when she's having conflicts later on in life, when she has those tools where she's able to explain herself a little bit more. Jen, I think that I see that you raised your hand.
I did. I feel like this is something that I'm experiencing with my my tween child, and it is such a delicate balance. And I feel like I love that you asked this question about how you could offer advice for Annie or the parent to show empathy to herself, because I think that's the thing, we like take it as a parent, like, we kind of take it personal, like, oh my God, like what did I do? And then it could easily, especially if you have grown up in a particular way, it could trigger some old inner child stuff too, and then might cycle into something. And so I would probably just suggest the parent to breathe, or find space to breathe, and allow that space and time for themselves to be calm, so that you can meet the child at a space where conversation can happen. And I think reminders, like one thing that we do at home is every night we do like gratitude, we call it gratitude circle, where we like talk about the day and like what's something about today that we are grateful for. And sometimes the older one does not want to do that, but we feel like it's really important to continue that as a family and just like end the day in a positive note. But sometimes he's very resistant, and so the balance of that, we have a conversation. Well, let's talk about it. Like, this is why we feel like it's important, why we want you to participate, and giving him options as to how he can participate. He doesn't need to like talk for like 5 minutes, that he can say a word or maybe express it in a different way, or like he plays with his cards a lot. So we say, you can show us, a move or show us something. And we found that was very helpful, is giving options to for him, so that he can be, as you said, that expression of autonomy too, to know that there is this part of him that's being independent, and that we're honoring that as well.
Oh, yes, that's so awesome, Jen. I love that too. I think that's so great. I think it's especially great because you are not positioning yourself with this rigidity, and it's not, again, this overbearing, we are the parents and we are the dictators of how you move and the things that you do, and really reframing that to give him options to just exist, I think is so lovely.
I was gonna say it's not always perfect, but like, I think we're making an effort. I just want to say that it's not always, it doesn't always end up in a really beautiful way of being, but it is very helpful. Like, I think just always going back to that autonomy and choice, like and being in that ritual or that rhythm of knowing and letting him understand that, oh, we hear you, is we're really trying. So thank you for that acknowledgement. I just want to make sure everybody knows, like, I'm not a perfect parent. I don't always know what I'm doing, but like, it's a lot of compassionate effort on, like, to the self and to one another.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Thank you. That's awesome. I love that. Patting ourselves on the back. This is great. So scenario number 3 says, whenever Dwayne's 8-year-old son, Tyler, spends time with Dwayne's parents, he notices that Tyler is a lot more quiet and less playful than he usually is. One day, while Dwayne is in the room, he overhears his father snap, "What is wrong with you?" after Tyler accidentally drops a dish on the floor. When Dwayne tries to talk to his father about his tone with Tyler, his father tells him that it's time Tyler be a man and less of a baby. How can Dwayne set some boundaries here? And what are some ways that he can show Tyler support and protection? And the chat is also an option for folks that want to type instead of talk.
I don't know how to, oh, sorry, my name's Elizabeth, and I don't know how to answer the first part, but like the second part where it says, what are some ways Tyler can show support, is I think he should, stop using the word, what's wrong with you, and like, is this gonna make you a man and stuff like that. I think he should tell, if it's Tyler or the parent, to don't use the word like be a man and that kind of language, because it's like, it's kind of, is it degrading? Like, it's not something, as a child gets older, like, it's kind of pretty hurtful, because certain things he's gonna like be like precaution, like, oh, I can't do this, or I'm gonna feel some type of way. This is not gonna make me feel more of a man or less than a man. So the only thing I would say to show support is taking away the word man and stuff like that. I don't know how to answer this. I think I'm too young. I don't know.
No, Elizabeth, you did an amazing job. Thank you for answering. I think that you nailed it in the sense where there was a lot of toxic masculinity and a lot of unhelpful gender typecasting kind of hopping out here. Whereas instead of taking accountability for being disrespectful to the child, that deflection of he needs to be a man is kind of thrown out instead. And so this relates back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is that the ways that you react to your child, you know, when they make a mistake, or the ways that you react to your child when they do something you don't like, is what they eventually will internalize as their own inner voice. And so, same thing when it comes to matters relating their own expression, their own gender. If people are violating that, and if people are, you know, making these harmful assumptions that it's okay to be disrespectful or verbally or emotionally abusive, um, if you have a son, or if you believe that will help your son be a man, you know, it's just things that intrinsically don't make very much sense and are not very helpful, and can only can only end up furthering and perpetuating harm and internalized violence. And in this case, it seems as though Dwayne's father has something that makes him uncomfortable with Tyler showing emotion, or Tyler being a child, you know, and not yet building up these fabricated walls of pretending not to care, these fabricated walls of denying their own emotional experience because of what they think others will say about them. And so, thank you for answering that in that way, because I think that you certainly were able to identify a lot of what was really not okay in this scenario. Would anybody else like to speak on this scenario too?
I'll just jump in and say, for Dwayne setting boundaries with his own father, I definitely think there needs to be like ideally like a one-on-one conversation with the dad, and you know, whether also like with the parents, so whether there's another person that's in the household as well, like along with Dwayne's father, and so yeah, really just to have a conversation. And I know, and again, it's like to your one of the first points is that it's not a one-time conversation, right? I think that's what's most important, is that it will be something that's like an ongoing conversation, but something that's, you know, can be a gentle reminder or direct, you know, conversation. So I think it really happens the best in a variety of ways. So not just expecting a one-time conversation, and not always having like a sit down, you know, one-on-one or, you know, family intervention, because that can be, I think, sometimes can, not to say do a disservice, but people sometimes don't receive well in that way. So, you know, also maybe supporting that with just, you know, in the moment, you know, amplifying their voice, or maybe speaking up for for Tyler and saying, you know, I think Tyler said he didn't want that, or, you know, like that kind of thing. But yeah, helping to reinforce, definitely.
I think like having that piece of like having that one-on-one ongoing conversation is necessary to plant those seeds, but also for Dwayne as a parent to gauge the level of open that his parents are to this process of unlearning and reframing and changing language. And I think that that can inform Dwayne of certain boundaries going forward. Maybe that looks like not leaving Tyler alone with his parents. Maybe that looks like having a separate conversation with Tyler where he's able to go back and address what happened. That's something too that a lot of parents might not think. If there is a mistake or something made in the moment, it's always possible. You know, your child still remembers. They're not goldfish, and so they still do have lasting memory, and they still think back and reflect in the same ways. And so it's possible to go back and say, do you remember yesterday when we were at grandpa's house? You know, and you're able to open up that conversation in that way, and show him some support in that way as well. And to also be an example that being a man doesn't really mean anything except what it means to the individual and how they're able to navigate the level of harm that they are unlearning or not willing to participate in. So thank you for everyone. Someone in the chat says, can you repeat what you said about how children develop their inner voice? Yeah, sure. So we were discussing earlier on about how the ways that we speak to our children in general, but the ways especially that we speak to them once they've made a mistake or done something that we don't like is eventually what they internalize as their own inner voice. And it turns into the ways that they talk to themselves when they catch themselves making a mistake, or if they do something that they don't like. So for example, if a child is raised with family that express to them that it's okay to make mistakes, and you know there usually isn't a mistake that huge that can't be fixed in some way, and relieving some of that anxiety, then that person might internalize as an adult, if they make a mistake, that it's okay to look for solutions rather than to stay in the space of blaming themselves. On the opposite side, if a child was raised with a family that was very unforgiving or very punitive when they made a mistake and chose to punish them or say harmful things to them, then that anxiety will follow them as an adult. And so their own internal dialogue and the way that they talk to themselves if they make a mistake might look pretty violent, or might look like self-harm, or not thinking that they're worth very much because of the ways that they have been spoken to. Does that make sense? I'm just checking the chat. Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely. It definitely gives us all insight on our own inner critic. One helpful thing that I always, tell my peers to think about is, especially if we're dealing with a particularly harmful inner critic, is to ask, who does this sound like? Which is always like a moment, because a lot of the times the things that are replaying in our heads aren't things that we just woke up and told ourselves one day. It might have been things that at some point was said or repeated to us over a period of time, and same thing with children. Awesome. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for participating in our activity. I'd like to invite us all to use this time to take a breath. You've been intaking a lot of information and having a lot of conversations. And so I think this is just a fabulous time to remind ourselves that we are all still learning and unlearning, and that there is deeply no wrong way to exist if we are maintaining an interest in wellness, and if we're maintaining an interest in the idea that we're not always right, or that we don't always know what to do. And that is a super important part of parenting as well, because again, the way that we are able to navigate our own inner world will reflect on the way that we treat everybody, especially those closest to us, and especially our children. So yeah, just inviting us to ground in that knowledge. If we've been sitting for a little bit, inviting some movement into our shoulders. We are almost at the end. I appreciate everybody for, again, your time and your patience being here. It's been so lovely. I love talking to parents. It's one of my favorite. And so we've moved on to the end of our time together today. So I'd like to invite any questions or anything that anyone would like to share on our checkout before we move on to just some closing announcements about the consent series conversation. And you can feel free to put that in the chat as well if you don't want to unmute. Okay, and if we end up thinking about something, we do still have a couple more moments together, so feel free. So our upcoming workshops with OnePeopleTO and myself, my name is Chloe again. I also do my work as the Reiki Healer. So we'll be meeting every Tuesday in February to have these conversations around consent. Sheena made a super awesome graphic that's up on the One People's Instagram, which I have at the bottom. I also invite you to check out the website as well. So the next coming workshops, we have our practicing safer sex positivity, professional consent and workplace wellness, and also holistic health and consent as we age. Sheena, did you have anything to add about the?
They will be the same time, so starting at 7, and they'll all be recorded as well. So you can, even if you can't join, and if you'd like the information, we can send it to you. Yeah, I'm excited for these upcoming workshops. I'm really grateful for this session today. I will say I'm personally not a parent, but I felt like they still were applicable to my own situation, to healing my inner child, and for interacting with the children that are in my life as well. So really helpful. Thank you. And children, youth, and like you said, I think probably the most favorite part is that we're children with just like extra age.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sheena. So yes, that's the end of our time together. So again, if we'd like to keep in touch, I have my socials listed here with the ReikiHealer.com coming real soon. And yeah, I appreciate everyone being here. This has been Building Better Bonds. And thank you again, Sheena, for this space. I hope that we're all able to learn and unlearn together, and I appreciate everyone's presence.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you for your knowledge, your expertise, just your energy and joy. It really means so much to have you here. Thank you, Jen, for joining. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Misha. And so this will be sent out, and I'd really love for you to share. Honestly, I think this is such an important conversation in all communities, and particularly as a Black body, consent is a really important conversation. That's why I'm excited, particularly for the workplace conversation and professional consent, and all the other conversations too. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Great night.